同学们，大家好！现在我们上新概念英语第四册的第38课。The sculptor speaks. Appreciation of the sculpture depends upon the ability to respond to form in 3 dimensions. That is perhaps why sculpture has been described as the most difficult of all arts. Certainly, it is more difficult than the arts which involve appreciation of flat forms, shape in only 2 dimensions. Many more people are form blind than color blind. The child learning to see first distinguishes only 2-dimensional shape. It cannot judge distances, depth. Later, for its personal safety and practical needs, it has to develop, partly by means of touch, the ability to judge roughly 3-dimensional distances. But having satisfied the requirements of a practical necessity, most people go no further. Though they may attain considerable accuracy in the perception of flat forms, they do not make the further intellectual and emotional effort needed to comprehend form in its full spatial existence. This is what the sculptor must do. He must strive continually to think of and use form in its full spatial completeness. He gets the solid shape, as it were, inside his head. He thinks of it, whatever its size, as if he were holding it completely enclosed in the hollow of his hand. He mentally visualizes a complex form from all around itself. He knows while he looks at one side what the other side is like. He identifies himself with its center of gravity, its mass, its weight. He realizes its volume as the space that the shape displaces in the air. And the sensitive observer of sculpture must also learn to feel shape simply as shape, not as description or reminiscence. He must, for example, perceive an egg as a simple single solid shape, quite apart from its significance as food or from the literary idea that it will become a bird. And so with the solids such as a shell, a nut, a plum, a pear, a tadpole, a mushroom, a mountain peak, a kidney, a carrot, a tree trunk, a bird, a bud, a lark, a ladybird, a bulrush, a bulrush, a bone. From these, he can go on to appreciate more complex forms or combinations of several forms. 好，那么我们先来看第一句啊。Appreciation of sculpture depends upon the ability to respond to form in 3 dimensions. 那么这一句是简单句啊，简单的一个限定句。好，那么我们看第二句。That is perhaps why sculpture has been described as the most difficult of all arts. 啊，那么这一句啊，这一句呢有一个表语从句啊，那个 be 动词后面的那个 why 的一个从句啊。那么这个是一个间接疑问句啊，为什么啊？为什么 why sculpture has been described as the most difficult of all arts 啊？那么这个是一个表语从句啊。后面 certainly it is more difficult than the arts which involves appreciation of flat forms, shapes. 好，那么这一句啊 certainly 啊it is more difficult than the arts. 好，那么 which involves appreciation of flat forms. 啊，这一句啊，这一句定语从句对不对 ？The arts 啊，这个 which 是指那个 arts 啊，那些 arts 啊 involve appreciation of flat forms, shape in only flat forms, shape in only 2 dimensions. 啊，那么这个啊，这个是 flat forms 的那个同位语啊。 进一步补充说明的啊 ，shape in only 2 dimensions， 这个是 forms 的同位语啊。后面 many more people are form blind than color blind。那么这一句是比较结构啊，比较结构啊。那么好，后面我们看 the child learning to see first distinguish only dimensional shape。好，那么这一句呢是一句简单句啊。这一句是简单句啊 ，the child learning to see 啊，first 就是那个好，那么我们和后面看 ，it cannot judge distance depth 好，那么这一句也是简单句啊，那么这一句里面的这个 it 啊，大家注意啊，这个 it 是指那个 child 的，那么有些时候我们把小孩啊可以称为 it 的啊，因为在这里啊，他把那个小孩看作生物的一种啊。跟其他的生物一样的啊，就所以说 it， 它这里没有用人称代词啊，用了一个非人称的代词啊，那它就跟其他生物也叫 it 啊 ，it cannot judge 了啊。Later, for its personal safety and appreciating needs, it has to develop the ability to judge roughly 啊，那么那么这句也是简单句啊 ，later 啊，那个这里的 it 呢也是那个 child 啊。那个 child has to develop the ability to judge roughly 3 dimensions。好，那么后面 ，but having satisfied the requirements of practical necessity, most people go no further。这一句简单句啊。那么这一句呢，前面呢有一个现在分词短语啊，做状语的。好，那么后面 ，though they may attain considerable accuracy in perception of flat form, they do not make the further intellectual and emotional effort needed to comprehend form interval 啊。那么这个呢，一开始呢上来呢是一个让步状语从句啊，以 though 引导的让步状语从句。Though they may attain considerable accuracy in the perception of flat forms, they do not make the further intellectual and emotional effort。那么这里呢一个。Needed to comprehend form in its full spatial existence。这个呢是一个过去分词短语，就是这个effort 啊 effort 啊，它是修饰 effort， 这个是 effort needed to comprehend the forms 啊。那么the form 好，那么后面 this is what the sculpture must do。好，那么这个呢又是有一句从句啊。以 what 引导的一个从句啊，那么这个呢也是一句名词性的叫融合性的一种从句啊。The thing, this is the things， 或者是the thing which the sculptor must do 啊。This is what the sculptor must do 啊。那么这个是一个从句，表语也是表语从句啊。后面 he must strive continually to think of and use form in its full completeness 啊。那么后面这个strive continue to think of and use form in its， 这个呢也是一句简单句啊。后面 he gets the solid shape as it were inside his head 啊。那么后面呢是一个普字号，我们加一下啊，一个普字号。那么我们这普字号后面是补充说明，我们现在来看这个前面的啊。He gets the solid shape as it were 那么这个呢 as it were 呢应该说是什么插入语啊，我们可以把它分析，这个是虚拟啊，过去虚拟的 as it were 好像 he gets the solid shape inside his head 啊，实际上这样。那么这个 as it were 呢是一个虚拟的一个插入语，好像啊，后面补充说明的啊 he thinks of it he thinks of it whatever its size, as if he were holding it completely inside the hollow of his hand。好，那么这里呢，首先一个啊，这个呢是一个主句啊 ，he thinks of it。那个这个 it 呢，这里呢是指那个啊，是指那个 form 啊，就是那个 shape。 solid shape 啊，那个 shape 啊，你 he gets the shape 对不对？那个 shape 呢，它呢这指的那个，那么后面这个 whatever its size 啊，这个呢又是一个一个状语从句啊 ，whatever 这不管它的尺寸啊，这个是省略的 ，whatever its size is 啊。那么他把这个is 省掉了，对不对啊？这个 whatever its size 啊，这个是一个状语从句啊。那么这叫什么？不管怎么样啊，就是说也有点像类似于让步的这种状语从句啊。状语从句啊 ，whatever its size 啊。啊，那么后面啊 ，as if he were holding 不，这个啊，这个是一句状语从句，以 as if 引导的一个状语从句啊。那么这个 as if 就大家知道好像，那么应该说是你可以说是比较状语从句或怎么样。那么这一句状语从句大家注意了，它是一个过去虚拟啊 ，as if he were holding it completely， holding it completely enclosed in the hollow of his 啊。那么这个是一个过去的一个虚拟啊，啊，明白吗？他用了一个虚拟句啊 ，as if he were holding it completely，holding it completely， 那么这个 enclosed 这个是一个过去分词的短语啊，completely holding it completely enclosed in his hand， in the hollow of his hand。好，这个呢是一个过去分词的短语啊，这个做宾语，这个宾语是 it 对不对？那个 shape 啊 ，solid shape 啊，它是做宾语补语的，那个 shape 啊 ，completely and enclosed 这个是宾语补语啊，这个是过去分词短语啊，然后。He mentally visualizes a complex form from all around itself， 啊，那么这一句是简单句啊，a complex form all around， 然后后面 he knows while he looks at one side what the other side is like. He identifies himself with its master， 好。那么这个呢是应该是两句话啊，他这里呢用了一个逗号来并列的啊，看到没有？用了一个逗号啊。那么因为这两句句子你可以把它看出是并列的啊。首先第一句啊，第一句是这个，然后第二句并列，后面还有并列的，它用分号。那么这里他用了一个逗号，那么这个我们不管它了啊。那么我们先看第一句 ，He knows while he looks at one side。好，那么这里面呢有一个 while he looks at one side， 这个是一个时间状语从句啊。He knows， 那么这个时间状语从句呢，插在了什么？插在了谓语动词和宾语之间啊。那么这个 while he looks at one side， 这个是一个时间状语从句，对不对？那么这个后面这个又是一个从句啊。What the other side is like？ 啊 ，sorry， 这个what the other side is like 啊，这个是什么？这个是一个宾语从句啊。间接疑问句啊，做这个 knows 的宾语的 ，he knows what the other side is like 啊，就是说这个做宾语的，做 knows 的宾语的，对不对？这宾语从句啊 ，what the other side。那么在这个宾语和那个谓语动词里面，它插了一个状语从句啊。好，那么后面 he identifies himself with its center of gravity, its mass and 好，那么 and its mass, its weight。好，那么这个呢，就是说这个也是一句简单句啊 ，and with its center of gravity。好，那么后面啊也是并列的这个 he realized its volume as the space that the ship displays as the space that the shape displaces in the air 啊。那么好，这里面有从句啊。首先这个主句是 he realized its volume 啊。那么后面这个 as 啊 ，as the space， 然后呢，它这个 volume 啊，他呢明白了，他在脑子里面他 realize its volume 嘛，他的那个 volume 嘛，然后是 as the space 啊，好，后面 that the shape displaces in the air， 啊，这个呢就是这个 as 是一个介词，这里啊 as 是一个介词 as the space。He realized its volume as the space 啊 as the space。那么后面这个 that the shape displaces in there， 这个呢是修饰这个 space 的。这个 space 就是什么？就是等于说这个 space the shape displaces in the air 啊。那么这个呢，这个关系代词啊 that 是指那个 space 啊。那个 space， 那个the shape displaces the space in the air。那么这个 that 呢是做宾语的啊，这里的这个 that 是关系代词做宾语啊，主语是 the shape 啊 ，the shape displaces the space in the air 啊。那么这个呢就是 volume 明白吗？那么这个呢就是比较复杂的啊，因为涉及到立体空间，而且呢空间立体呢它用了很多的那个不同的单词。有的是叫 volume， 有一个单词叫 shape， 还有呢叫 form， 对吧？那么这个里面呢有一点区别啊，这个大家自己去查字典啊。那么这里面是有区别的啊。那么但是他们都是同义词啊，近义词啊，应该是近义词，对不对？他们之间有关联的啊。那么好，后面 ，and the sensitive observer of a sculpture must also learn to feel shape simply as shape, not as different on reminiscence 啊。那么 sensitive observer must also learn to feel shape simply as shape, not as 啊，这个是简单句，对不对？然后后面 he must, for example, perceive an egg as a simple single solid shape, quite apart from its sequence food or from the literary idea that it would become a bird 啊。那么这个啊。主句呢是 he must, for example, perceive an egg as a simple single shape。然后这里啊，这个是做状语的啊，这个是一个介词短语 apart from 嘛 ，quite apart from 就是做状语的，你也可以修饰什么a single solid shape 的，对不对？啊 ，quite from all from 这里呢，它两个状语啊并列的啊，一个是。它等于说呢是 quite apart from its as for from its significance as food, or from the literary idea that blah 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 啊。那么这个 from 啊，这两个 from 是并列的，这两个介词短语啊，这个一个 from 啊，这个介词短语啊，和后面这个 from 的这个介词短语啊是并列的，用了一个 or 来并列的啊。那么你也可以说这个地方后面第二个 from 啊。省掉了一个 apart or apart from the literary 啊，那么后面的这个第二个这个介词短语里面呢，还有一个同位语从句啊 ，that it will become 这个 that it will become a bird 这个是 idea 的同位语啊，因为什么 idea？The idea it will become a bird 啊，那应该是这个是同位语啊，对不对？And so with the solid such as a shell, with the solid such as a shell, are not a plum blah 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 blah， 缺一个这好，那这一句啊，这一句大家注意了，没有动词的啊，这一句是一个句非限定句啊，但是它作为一句句子了，这里面没有限定动词啊。So with the solids such as a shell。A nut, a plum, a pear, blah blah blah, a mushroom, a kidney, a bud, a lark, a ladybird, a bone 啊，这一句呢，大家就知道了，这句它也算整个一句句子的，对不对？但是它这句句子啊，没有限定动词的，对不对？也没有主语的啊，这个是一个无动词的那个短语啊，但是呢，它作为整个一句是句子啊，所以这里大家看出来这种句子啊。在英文里面第4册看到的句子就很多都是非常特殊的一些句子出来了啊。好，后面 from these he can go on to appreciate more complex forms or combination of several forms 啊。From these he can go on to appreciate more complex forms or combination， 这一句也是简单句啊，对不对？简单句。好，那么今天这课就讲到这，谢谢大家，再见。